All right. Well, in that case, let's just I'm so nervous all of a sudden.
I know, sorry.
I don't know why I'm nervous.
This is part of the fun. And my microphone just fell off its stand.
Oh no.
It's a sign, call the whole thing off.
I was about to do the thing too.
No, think about it. Think about your intro a little bit. I'll get this back up and gotta give it the Jack Black. Come on, you freaking piece of shit.
Oh my god.
Oh, yep, it's the lug nut.
Topical.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Quiet on the set. So dumb. I'm so nervous. All right, let's go in 3, 2, 1.
Autobots, transform and roll out.
Mike! So many Mike! So many Mike! So many Mike! So many Mike!
Welcome, folks, and welcome to this brand new Transformers podcast, Two Mikes, Too Furious. My name is Mike Seibert, and I am joined by also a Mike. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
The other titular Mike, if you will. I'm the other Mike, Mikel Andrews, spelled a little bit different than our Mike, but we're going to be getting into something I really love, which is Transformers animated.
Yeah, so we are Two Mikes, Too Furious animated Transformers, I guess, and and so this is a podcast where we are going to discuss Transformers animated, starting with the pilot Transform and Roll Out ! And I'm sure you've heard a million episode recaps, a bunch of Transformers recap shows, some of which we're fans of as well, and we'll shout out during the show here, like we're super homies with Autopod Decepticast, as well as some others. In fact, this show is kind of in a Joni Loves Chachi kind of way. It's almost kind of like a spin-off of APDC, even though none of those folks have anything to do with this project, but we'll kind of unpack some of that in due course. But the gimmick with this particular Transformers animated recap discussion show is that even though I am a lifelong Transformers fan, I call myself been G1 from day one. September of 1984. I've been there the entire time. Transformers the movie is not just my favorite Transformers thing, but it is also my favorite movie. Just like of the movies. So that's kind of my entree into Transformers fandom. But for as much Transformers content as I have consumed and celebrated, Transformers animated is a huge blind spot for me. I passed on it when it first came around, and as it got further and further away, I never really took the opportunity to get into it. But over the last 3-4 years, as I've gotten more involved with the larger Transformers fandom, the one thing I have been told more than anything is, you haven't seen TFA? Gasps in Spanish. And I've been told by many people I trust, many people I've gotten to know in this fandom, it's like, you need to go check it out. There is plenty there that you specifically, meaning me, Mike Seibert, that you will love. So,
absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
And for that, I could have just sat down and watched it, right? It's like, it's available on Tubi TV. It's, the DVDs aren't impossible to get, but tougher to get from what I understand. But anyway, I could have sat down and just watched it, but I thought, what's the fun in that? Being a podcaster, I host my own show, Mike Seibert Radio, the Mike Seibert Radio podcast. And when you do a podcast, you get into this mentality that everything is content. So it's like, if I buy toys, well, that gives me content to unbox and show off on the internet. It's just a weird thing about how a podcaster's mentality works. Everything is content. But with that mentality, I thought it would be better to, do it as a podcast. And that's part of a truncated version of the story of how I got connected with Mikel Andrews and how we're doing this show here for you now. But enough from me. I've talked for several minutes, and you'll see patterns like this. You're as you go through the show, you're like, this Mike Seibert guy talks a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts where there's like two hosts and you can't tell them apart. I promise you will be able to tell us apart because I am the one that cannot shut up.
100%.
So that being said, so that's just like a little bit of kind of how we got here now. But Mikel Andrews, take the floor and maybe talk about your side of things.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's great, just getting back to you being the talker, yeah, you are excellent at that. And as a person that has to work on that myself and being a little more outspoken, you're my rock, man. You talk forever, talk however you want. But for me, Transformers Animated, I just love it. It was such a bright spot when it came back around. I don't know if you've listened to any other Transformers podcast I've been on, you know how much I love the movies, the live action movies. So for me, this was sort of tying into that, but giving like a cartoon version. Like they took so much lore from the live action films and digested it and made a cartoon out of it. So that's why I really love it. And I was kind of surprised, Mike, that you hadn't seen it because of all the like Transformers content out there. This is I'd say this has the most Easter eggs and most borrows the original material of the original series, and not just the original series, but the movie you so love, the 84 movie, or excuse me, the 86 movie. I think you'll find so many things in this they're directly gleaned from that film to love. So I'm really excited to see it kind of through your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is kind of the response I get from folks. It's like, really? You haven't watched it? for those reasons that you're just saying. And even in my brief viewing, because like so far all I've watched for this podcast is the pilot, Transform and Roll Out. And even then there's already stuff there. It's like,
oh yeah,
now I understand what people were telling me. But I do want to talk about a little bit about why I decided to pass on it, because I think both at the time and maybe even now retroactively, TFA is a little polarizing in that like I would say that in current times it's been kind of reclaimed, and that's part of what this project is. Not necessarily a reclamation project, but kind of like blowing the dust off of it and saying like, oh, this series is worth your attention, and we're going to kind of explain to you why and reinvigorate this affection for the show. But I passed on it based entirely on the design aesthetic. It came at a time, and I was at an age where that looked like it was something that was just in capital letters, not for me. Because, one of the things that we're going to discuss is, this is a bit of a historical document, and it fits in kind of a interesting transitional point for Transformers media. Like this is kind of coming on the heels of the movie. So you have the 2007 movie, which reinvigorates the franchise in a big bad way, and then in a weird way this is kind of the follow-up, and that's I think that might go down in history as an odd choice. I think something more like Transformers Prime is probably more of a spiritual successor to the live action movies, at least aesthetically. So I had, Transformers fandom reinvigorated for me. And then I see the previews and I see one, the cartoonishly exaggerated stylized designs. That was a little too much for me. I like stylized animation, I mean, Batman the Animated Series, that whole Bruce Timm aesthetic. It's like I like some stylization, but I think for my taste, when a design aesthetic goes so far the other direction into cartoonishness, it becomes cartoonism. I love it. It just wasn't my taste. It felt to me that it was something for kids, and there being for kids is in the DNA of Transformers, whether we like it or not. Even as we get older ourselves, it's like that. This is supposed to be content and material for kids. I mean, we can enjoy it as adults, but yeah, it's also supposed to be for kids. But long story short is it just wasn't for me. So, and I think by the time my friends were getting in my ear, it was almost kind of too far gone. And now it has a weird place in history, and almost, I don't want to say a forgotten piece of history, because like there's a lot of people that stand for TFA as much as the day is long. But it's not top of mind. So it is something that I think like perhaps the larger fandom has kind of moved on from. And I'm hoping that with this podcast, this will kind of blow off your fandom, like whether you've seen TFA before and wanted an excuse to come back for it, or if you're like me and experiencing this for the first time. I think our dynamic is going to give you a little bit of something for everybody, because Mikel Andrews, you're like a super stand for TFA.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we're getting into our hopes and dreams a little bit, that's why I'm excited to do this with you, because you are seeing it for the first time. This is a show I've watched beginning to end several times. And now I'm seeing it again kind of through your eyes for the first time. So that's going to let me see new things, but also get excited about stuff again. It's not just like listening to the same song over and over for once. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited for it to reinvigorate my love of Transformers in general. I feel like I've gotten a little bit away with that, just some life stuff getting in the way. So I'm excited to get back into that. And you specifically, Mike, I think have gone through like what I call the fanboy cycle. I even wrote that down in my notes. The fanboy cycle of, you started with a hardcore love of Transformers from very young. Like you said, you were there from the beginning. Mm-hmm. You went through your phase of like G1 only. The original Transformers movie is the only Transformers, not my Transformers, hashtag, that sort of thing. And now you're kind of back. Now you've gone full circle, because now you sort of like different iterations. You're at that point where you can like look at things that are different and not hate them because they're different than G1, like them because they're different than G1. Yeah. So I'm excited to be going on this journey with someone like that's gone through like the full spectrum of Transformers fandom.
I love that. The fanboy cycle.
Cycle. We're on the other side of it.
We need to make a button out of that or something.
Yeah.
That's a ton of fun, because you're absolutely right. It's like I had kind of like that staunch G1er perspective, but then I got to know more folks in the fandom, and I've grown an appreciation, as you've already eloquently said, for stuff that's different, and appreciating those differences because of the differences, as opposed to resenting them for the differences. It's like, oh, well, that's not Sideswipe, that's just a Corvette on roller skates. It's like, that's and now I'm on the other side, where I was like, you know what, that is a pretty damn cool character, and a pretty cool vibe and aesthetic and all of that other stuff. So I've come all the way back around in the fanboy cycle, as you say. So basically, mechanically, let's talk about how we're kind of watching the show. So I don't have TFA on physical media, so I am watching it on Tubi TV. Tubi is a free streaming service that you can download as an app or watch it on your computer or smartphone. I have it on my TV, so I can watch it. I could watch this TV cartoon on TV. And it was kind of funny. We fired it up and my wife was like, well, how long have we had this? I was like, I don't know. I think it was on the TV when we bought it.
Yeah.
But
Tubi rocks.
Yeah, Tubi rocks. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff on there.
Two Mics, Too Furious, brought to you by Tubi TV.
Exactly. Well, and because like I just want to make sure that folks have access to be able to watch the shows. But so when I watched Transform and Roll Out ! It's presented as 3 episodes, 3 separate episodes that are presented as episodes 1 through 3. So when we were talking about watching this show and breaking it down episode by episode, I thought the first episode was Transform and Roll Out Part 1. I didn't realize that it was a larger pilot. But could you talk about, kind of like how you're watching it and how you viewed this episode?
Yeah,
Or
that's
episodes,
really good.
I guess.
That's a really good point because for me, that's never been like the first 3 episodes because it sort of aired like a movie. It aired, if I remember correctly, it aired prime time or pretty prime time as far as Cartoon Network goes. And I remember having my friends over for an event. Like they weren't necessarily interested in Transformers, but I was like, you got to come over for this. There's a new show. It's kicking off with a movie. Like this is big. And so, so I sort of saw it first as a movie. And then later when the seasons came out, even the season 1 DVD collection doesn't have those first 3 episodes in it. You had to buy that separately. And it came like a movie on a disc called Transformers and Roll Out. There wasn't this part 1, part 2, part 3 breakdown. It was just a movie on a separate disc. And then you started with episode 1 on the season 1 collection. So I've always kind of, in my mind, it's always been kind of broken up from the rest of the series. Like this is like a kickoff movie and then there's the series proper. So yeah, like you said, we had to kind of work through the logistics of is this an episode or is this a movie?
Yeah, I was really confused because like I kept talking about like episode 1 and and the episode you were talking about, I was like, well, no, that's episode 4 on my thing. So we may still yet run into some of those challenges, but we will get through it.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, and I think to add another point to that is that we've sort of taken on the fact that like collectively, whether or not we talk about it as 3 episodes or a mini movie, this is sort of like a broad overview because I think, after this sort of like 3-part movie, whatever you want to call it, then we start to get into the episodes proper where like there's character-based episodes, everyone gets their moment to shine, and then we can kind of start talking about the logistics of it. So I think for now, for our purposes, we're going to keep this a little high level, keep it a little fun, kind of hopes and dreams for our show, for the show that we're watching, and just what's to come.
Absolutely. And with that, let's dive right in as they say. And the first thing that strikes me about having watched Transform and Roll Out ! That's what I'm going to keep calling it, by the way.
Please,
because that's I have a tether to that phrasing for a number of different reasons. So I like the exclamation point, but this episode feels very, very much like a pilot. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of world building, and it's a lot of info dumping in a very short time. You had mentioned before we started recording that more or less like this first 10 minutes here is very foundational and lays a lot of track and a lot of world building.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton in the first 10 minutes alone. But it's not, as you're watching it, you're not like, oh, they're info dumping. Like, it does really feel really natural. And then this like fast action starts picking up, and there's not a moment to take a breath. It's action. It's steamrolling right through. And I think that really plays credit to Marty Eisenberg, who's the head writer for the show. And if you look at other shows he's done, notably Ben 10, one of my other favorites, there is just sort of this like advanced level of writing and world building, and he takes time to really like think out a lot of the plot, if not the entire plot of the series, at least far enough in advance that he's dropping foreshadowing and Easter eggs in the first episode, where a lot of shows, especially cartoons, don't take the time to do that. They just kind of, we're going to be a Monster of the Week show, and fun stuff's going to happen. There seems to be more thought, and the more, now I've watched this beginning movie several times, and like the more I see it, the more I'm like seeing things I didn't notice, like, oh my gosh, he's just giving away the ending here, or like, and I don't want to spoil those things for you, Mike, who hasn't seen the entire series, but you'll just have to trust me, there's an incredible amount of foreshadowing just in these 10 minutes alone.
See, and that's fascinating, because one of the things that struck me about watching this is that there's so much payoff even within itself. Like there are several like character beats and gags that get paid off almost immediately, to where it's like, oh, I mean, it feels very economical. It doesn't feel like anything is wasted. So I'm really excited. You've really whet my appetite now for like what's to come, because like for as much as it pays off within itself in this first pilot, that there's stuff, lines being cast down the line. I can't wait. But I think we one of the ongoing themes that I think we'll talk about during this podcast is, who is this for? And I think when you start the show, like literally the first image you see out of that kinetic intro, which is very much of its time, the first image you see is the classic Autobot symbol. And already it's just like, wait a sec, what? And then it's and friends had told me about this, and I always smiled and nodded politely and laughed. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. They took a G1 and made it a propaganda video. Oh, that's so funny, without knowing the context, but seeing it, especially in this presentation with like the fake video grain, and where it's footage from the classic episode War Dawn, where you see Megatron and the kind of the rise of the Decepticons and Guardian robots, and recontextualizing that as kind of a propaganda piece, a propaganda video, I thought was a very interesting way to start the series.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really smart way to start the series. I do want to get some more of your thoughts on that, but I think it's a very interesting way to start it, smart way to start it, because you are kind of speaking to the original G1 fan. You can get them on board right away. You can give them something they weren't expecting to see. And then you can kind of do whatever you want. Now you hook them in for a little bit. But I guess along with that, let's talk about it. The very first thing you see in the show is this original footage from the original series. And that's sort of like their historical war footage. What they're saying with this is like, here's actual like footage of the battle that is behind us now and way in the past. How do you feel about that, Mike? Is that sort of like too on the nose, or is that too much continuity from the original series for you? Or do you like that it's sort of, connecting to the original series in that way, actually making it canon for within the show?
I kind of went through the fanboy cycle, in that, like, first I thought it was cool that, oh hey, G1, but then I thought it was kind of odd, because we learn almost immediately, just by the fact that it's Optimus Prime watching this video, that it's not a continuation of G1. TFA cannot be a continuation of G1 just because of the characters and situations, and their contextualization of the old war is completely different. So like by that, it can't be a continuation. So my brain was kind of noodling through that, trying to figure out like, well, if it's not a continuation, then what is this then? And really what it is where the cycle comes around. It's like, oh, they're using old footage, one, to kind of tickle the nostalgia a little bit, but then use it and recontextualize it as something new and different. And I think it sends the message immediately, especially since it's Optimus that's watching it, and especially since Ratchet is there with him, and there is clearly a age gap and divide, like where, you know, even Optimus says like, well, you were there.
All the great Autobot leaders learned from the past.
Look around, Prime. The Great Wars ended centuries ago.
But you were there, Ratchet. You saw some action. What were the Decepticons really like?
Trust me, kid, you're better off not knowing.
You know, and even the mention that it was millions of years ago. So it's like, not only is the war over, but the war has been over for millions of years before we even meet these characters. So it's like, it gets my brain turning almost immediately that these are Autobots that have had millions of years of peacetime. And that's, that really kind of gets it cooking, but then also lays the groundwork that Optimus Prime is a bit of a history buff, which is a nice little bit of character. I think that's I think that's interesting footing to start him off with, because like this opening dialogue between him and Ratchet was there. Ratchet has seen some shit. As we learn, the more we get to know him, it's like his grouchiness is directly informed by his PTSD and you know, just kind of like the imprint the war left on him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, along with that, okay, let me just run through like what you learned in the first 10 minutes. Then we can kind of maybe go back and dig into some deeper stuff. So yeah, you learned that the 84 series, I mean, we've kind of broken it down now, but the 84 series is kind of basically history. This is a long time removed from what we saw. We're introduced to a ragtag group of space bridge grunts. This is sort of like a construction team that's going out and like repairing old space bridges. They have nothing to do with the war necessarily. They're just kind of out there, you know, doing grunt work, doing the blue collar stuff. They stumble across the Allspark, which is a legendary artifact that at this point some Cybertronians don't even believe in. And it was sent through the space bridge to end the war. And this is like a classic shoot the hostage situation, right? Like someone at some point said, we got to get rid of the Allspark just to stop the war. And maybe it wasn't the best idea, but they're like, hey, let's shoot out into space. And then once it's gone, either Megatron will go play fetch, or he'll at least not have something to keep after. Mm-hmm. And real quick here, I love this, of course, because the Allspark was actually a concept that was introduced in the first live action movie. So that's a great tie-in for me. And I just love that they like took that little bit of lore and like kind of like canonized it into something else. So made it a little more real.
I like that for a stretch, the Allspark became the MacGuffin of choice for Transformers lore, even as recently as the War for Cybertron series on Netflix.
Yeah.
And,
well, I bring it up because I don't think a lot of people realize that that's something that came from the live action movies. This, you know, it's so easy to shit on the Michael Bay movies that we kind of forget that there's some like established lore that we got from those. Mm-hmm. So that's in there. I think that also something to establish that's important is that Optimus has history with Sentinel Prime and Ultra Magnus. And if you remember our little soft open episode that we did about the Halloween episode, quote unquote, mm-hmm. I mentioned that this is one of my favorite things about it, is that there's sort of like this backstory between Sentinel and Optimus that we get right away. Like that there's something there. He has some background from this. And we also see Ultra Magnus, who's in a very high position of power. And that was exciting to see one of my favorite characters of all time, like within this first 10 minutes. So yeah, if you're keeping track at home, we already have a lot of stuff just in the first 10 minutes. And we're also getting that the Decepticons, this is really interesting. The Decepticons at this point are sort of boogeymen, right? They're long gone. Few people believe they still exist. Some Cybertronians don't believe that they ever existed. We're talking about so far out from a war that people don't even think that faction exists. And it's a little, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a little bit of it's getting a little too real, because it kind of reminds me of like Holocaust deniers, right? Like you become so far removed from a thing that you sort of like, either you're pretending on some level that it doesn't exist, or you really just don't think it does, because you're just reading out of through books.
Yeah, well, and I think having Ratchet as part of that crew helps ground that and puts a tether to it, because like anytime they're talking about the Decepticons and Megatron in kind of like those hushed tones, you've got Ratchet with that perspective of having been there, that I think puts it more in a grounded, realistic footing.
That's true, but then you also have Optimus is pretty much the only one on that crew that sort of believes him, or sort of, as the history buff, he's sort of treating it like, what you're saying is factual truth. Whereas, Bumblebee, Bulkhead, and Prowl sort of see Ratchet as, kind of like Cup's war stories from the movie. Like, did it happen this way, or is this really? Because I think even at some point Bumblebee makes mention of like Megatron, like
Megatron, as in the cruel and vicious Decepticon leader who eats Autobot protoforms for breakfast.
Like it's such a Darth Vader-y, mythical character at this point that. Can we believe in it?
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, you're absolutely right. I was gonna double down on your analogy earlier with having Ratchet there. It would be the equivalent of having a survivor of the Holocaust there with you, and you're talking about like Holocaust deniers, and it'd be like, yeah, dude, I was there. Hey.
Yeah. And how frustrating it must be for him that like no one's taking him seriously, that Megatron did in fact exist, that this war happened. Then you have these like punk kids that are just out there doing, their summer construction job to make a few bucks, and they don't care. I
like that we meet this Autobot crew the way that they are. They're very naive. They're a bunch of dumb kids, especially Bulkhead and Bumblebee. They're knuckleheads.
Right. Well, and to round out this first 10 minutes here, the last thing we learn is that the Decepticons do in fact exist. We actually see them. We see a crew of them on a ship, sort of doing their Decepticon infighting that we've come to know and love about the Decepticons. And I think that scene is great because, and I totally forgot it existed until I rewatched this, that they show you all the Decepticons right then and there. And it's shadowy and it's dark, and you're only kind of going by silhouettes, kind of who's that Decepticon Pokemon style.
Yeah.
But it shows them, it shows right away. Like if you're questioning if the Decepticons still exist, question no more. Here they are. And that's kind of the last bit of like world building you just get in this wham bam first 10 minutes. And if we can go back a little bit too,
please.
Another thing.
I want to go back too. I got
I want to break down the characters a little bit too, but I think it's really cool that we talked about like denying, if you believe that the war happened, if you believe that the Decepticons are still here, whether or not nobody this is something true for the show, that nobody knows Megatron still exists. Like both Autobots and Decepticons are sort of like you see it now. You see the Autobots don't know that Megatron still exists. And then later in the show, you see the Decepticons not believing that Megatron still exists. So in one show, we get to see like both factions kind of like truly existing without the shadow of Megatron. And I think that's something that's kind of really cool and unique to this series.
I get the feeling that's going to change a great deal of dynamics, because like, you know, jumping all the way to the end of this episode where Megatron is essentially a captive and without any kind of autonomy that I've seen, I get the feeling he's going to find a way to break out of that ice as he always does. But
possibly,
but it for my takeaway at the end of Transform and Roll Out is that basically Megatron is off the board and has like been off the board, and that's that. It's interesting. Storytelling devices that are similar to the 2007 movie and TFA. It's like they share a couple things in that. One, the Allspark is the MacGuffin, and then two, you know, Megatron is not just off the board in terms of like a player in the dynamics, but is also integral to the development of human technology. It's like both of those. Now they handle it very differently in that, like, you know, in the 2007 movie, it's more like, you know, America has taken this giant robot and have retrofitted you know, this technology for, like, you know, all of society, whereas Sumdac Industries is one dude. I mean this. Yeah, I mean, it's a real Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk situation.
Yeah. Well, and also the difference too is that it's sort of become, the technology's made it sort of a utopia. It's made Detroit into like a utopia society almost. And it's interesting because I don't know, I was going to ask you this, Mike, when we get a little later into it, but maybe I'll ask you now. Sure. Do you get the takeaway that the world is benefiting from Sumdac's inventions, or do you think it's like just this city on the map that is sort of progressing faster than the rest of the world because of these inventions?
I took the
Detroit a prototype city, I guess.
Right. Yeah. That's my take. And I took the narration literally, where like in the I guess the second act, you know, kind of opens up with, you see like you see 50 years later the cityscape and the highways and BurgerBot and, you know, kind of like this stylized new Detroit, and it says something to the effect of, you know, Detroit has become a utopia.
Back in the early 20th century, Detroit was known as the Motor City, the automobile manufacturing capital of the world. Today, Detroit is once again the world's leading manufacturer, not of automobiles, but automatons, robots, or as we here at Sumdac Systems like to call them, our tireless mechanical partners. Ever reliable, never complaining.
So I took that on its face literally to mean just Detroit.
Sure. And still just Detroit, that it's just kind of the bright spot in a otherwise like dark world.
A bubble. So it's like, sure. I don't think the Sumdac robots exist outside of this area. Right. I mean, we'll see how that goes. And this is going to be kind of one of the interesting dynamics as well, is because like there are a couple things since this you know show is over 15 years old now. There are certain things that are just part of like the lexicon. Like, you know, it's like, you know, that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. You know that Bucky Barnes is the Winter Soldier. You know, so there are some empirical things about Transformers Animated that I know, but I don't know the context. So really what this is going to be about is not so much me learning like the hard spoilers, but for me learning the context for for those things. So
Sure.
so we're going to run into stuff like this where you know something, Mikel Andrews, and the audience might know something, you that have watched TFA before. Or you could be like me and some of my friends who are going through some of this the first time. I just like the idea of putting some of these things out in the world for folks to interact with one way or the other. It's like, Mike sounds like a real dum-dum, or like, oh, there's stuff he doesn't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to be one of my biggest challenges is how do I talk about foreshadowing without telling you it's foreshadowing? That's something I'm still kind of working on. I even have like little notes in here that are like secret foreshadowing to remind myself is like, go ahead and don't talk about it yet. See if Mike brings it up. So maybe at the very end of this whole show, I can go back and all these things I've labeled secret foreshadowing, I can finally point out to you. But just to dial it back a little bit, I guess rewind, maybe transform and rewind here. Exclamation point.
Yeah.
We should talk about we wanted to keep this kind of high level, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about at least the cast of Autobots that we see, if not getting into, voices and stuff like that today. I think we should talk about who we do see, and then kind of a little like historical breakdown, what we're seeing from a high level of this 3-part series and what it means for the rest of the show. Okay, so I do want to maybe run through that first. So what we see at the end of those first 10 minutes is that kind of to recoup where we were at just a minute ago, Megatron is destroyed. He's lost to space. And this is in no small part to scheming Starscream, which seems to be a trope that we follow all through Transformers, right? You know exactly that they're sort of like frenemies and that Starscream is going to betray Megatron at some point. And we see it right away. He attaches an explosive device to Megatron. Megatron blows up. That's how, Megatron's head ends up on Earth, where it's found in a cornfield. It's discovered by Isaac Sumdac as a little kid. And then Optimus steers the ship, his crashing arc. He steers that away from civilization into Lake Erie, which triggers an emergency stasis mode for the crew. And that's where they go into slumber for 50 years. And Mike, I was hoping you could remind me, how long are the Autobots in slumber in the original series? Was that
4 million years?
Yeah. So here's a much shorter time. They're just underwater for 50 years compared to the 50 million years they spent in that the 4 million years they spent in the volcano.
Yeah. So, okay. So, I know you got more notes, but can we stop there for a second? Yeah. Because there's a couple things to unpack. One, time travel seems to proceed in a weird way in Transformers lore. So back in 1984, you have the time jump of 4 million years, with the implication that the war has continued with the both leaders and command structure of both the Autobots and the Decepticons off the board, which is fascinating storytelling in its own type of thing. But it's really just a storytelling device to get the Transformers to present day. Present day being 1984. Yeah. So because it sounds very cool in sci-fi for it to be, many millions of years ago and that kind of thing. But over time, it's become like, we've seen this a lot in comic books and stuff, where it's just like, oh no, the war has just been happening for millions and millions of years. And there is an aspect of that trope that I don't know if I understand. I don't know why it needs to be tens of millions of years, because really the jump of millions of years, again, is just to get the Transformers to present day. So I don't know. It just at a time where you don't have to do that. Because like in the IDW comics, every iteration of it where they just show up on Earth in present day. but they've been having this millions-year war, and I don't know. It just makes my brain itch. Specifically here with TFA, there's a few things that I don't understand. One, we learn after the Autobots reawaken in Detroit and start interacting with the humans that they have no idea or understanding about what humans are. In fact, like when they first see Sorry, they assume that she's the pet of the robot dog.
Right,
And even Bulkhead says, like, "Hey man, have you lost your robot master or something?" I don't think that was the line, but more or less like the implication that these squishy organic life forms would be pets.
What is that thing?
Must be some kind of pet.
Why would the four-legged bot want a pet that big? Hi, little creature. My name's Bulkhead. Did you lose your owner, bot?
Well, and along with that too, another one of my favorite moments in the whole show is that Bumblebee, when he says something to the effect of like, does nobody talk on this planet? Because he's like asking cars and vehicles like questions. I thought that was a great little joke and kind of, more world building, that they don't know anything outside of like, robotic organisms.
Mm-hmm. Bumblebee gets some really great lines, and we'll definitely talk about those as we come to them. But the thing that struck me as weird is like, so the ship comes out on the other side of the space bridge, and Optimus needs to take manual control to prevent from crashing and destroying the civilization. If they don't know what humans are, how do they know what this society is and that they need to avoid destroying it? You got any insight on that?
Well, I think they saw buildings and lights, and maybe just they detect electricity, and to them that was like, oh, there's life down there, right? Like maybe that's why. I just think it was unlike when in the old series when they're crashing into just like trees and jungle and stuff like that. This was very clear, like, oh, this is different. This is like a structure, and this is signs of life no matter what. And I think that classic Optimus kicked in and was like, hey, just in case this can't hit here.
Absolutely.
And maybe maybe he didn't even know. Maybe there wasn't like that civilization. He was just like, aim for water, because we didn't have time to properly scan this planet for life.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Well, and you could see out the window that you could see the cityscape. So you could see what they're avoiding. Yeah. So if they think that vehicles are life forms, so yeah, maybe they saw a bunch of cars. Or something. I mean, so there's any number of,
or there was just like an electromagnetic center in this spot that there wasn't somewhere else, and it's like, oh, that could be our brethren down there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm sure this won't be the last time that this comes up, the explanation I want to avoid is shrug, well, it's a kid's cartoon. Because the writing on this show is way too clever for that.
Yes, they don't do a lot of that. Just kind of throwaway stuff. It's important, and it's got a story beat in a lot of cases.
But that being said, other than to have the Transformers off the board for more or less the story has to happen. You need to have a time jump for Isaac Sumdac to tinker with Megatron's head and to grow up to be a renowned scientist, and for New Detroit to blossom the way it is, for the Autobots to reemerge there. I don't understand, other than that, for the need of going into stasis. I didn't, especially with it being voluntary.
Sure.
I don't
Well, I would argue that just the setting alone of this, utopian Detroit that has been spawned from learning about the technology of Cybertronian technology from Megatron's head, which he found in a cornfield. I think
Papa.
that, right. So I think from a setting of, we needed time to like build up this city that's sort of based around this technology reasonably. There's also a little nod to, well, I think if you were like show running this show and you wanted to plot out some Easter eggs, it'd be like, well, the Autobots have to go into stasis, right? Or like someone does. We need a little throwback to that, and them waking up so you can get the classic like Teletran moment and the scanning of vehicles.
The Sky Spy, explore, repair. Yeah.
And outside of that, though, the rest I can't. This is a secret foreshadowing moment that I don't want to maybe get into. But I will say, just like a lot of the things in this show, it's not without reason that some time has passed, and there's other sort of cool things that come out of that passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm glad they didn't skip that.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Well, and so if I can really quickly, maybe not really quickly. We don't do anything quickly here.
No.
But we should, if we're talking about the crew going into stasis, maybe this is a good time to maybe just at least talk about the crew that's going into stasis before we get too far ahead of ourselves. I want to talk about these, Mike, because I want to get your kind of take of are these archetypal characters for you? Like, do you get who they are in that first 10 minutes? Do you get to squint test and sort of see who these archetypes are? So first I'll just go through them real quick, and then we can kind of break down some of their character traits and what you thought of them.
Sure.
So of course we have Optimus Prime. We see him and Ratchet on the bridge chatting. He's kind of their leader, although it's not as maybe necessarily as established of I am the leader of the Autobots as it has been heavy-handed in some other properties. We have Ratchet, who's just kind of the old guy left over from the Great War, kind of grumpy, the sort of like Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, which I think is great. And to your point earlier when you said he's seen some shit, this show is going to break down exactly the shit he saw onto and into the third season. So you won't even know the whole what shit he's seen until the end of the show. And it's quite incredible.
Wow.
We have Prowl, who I think is a really interesting character because he's set up to be just sort of like this brash, young, cocky, doesn't need the crew, can do it all by himself. And we typically see this a little bit more from Bumblebee. So when you see Prowl, it's kind of like, well, what's Bumblebee going to be if we already have like the cocky, arrogant, who I don't need anybody else. I think that's one thing really interesting they did with Prowl. We get Bulkhead, who I just love Bulkhead. This is, a character that was kind of invented for this show. He's sort of a stand-in for Hound. He's just kind of the simple brute. But
you're kind of Ironhide too, sort of.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Just like a salt of the earth, blue collar dude.
Yeah. Just a big lovable grunt. And I do love him. He's, if we're doing favorites, he's probably my favorite of the original Autobot cast here. And then finally, this is a sore spot for me a little bit that we have Bumblebee. Rounds out the crew. He's kind of the youngest, fieriest of them all. He's not necessarily cocky. That's kind of Prowl's job, but he is sort of that like young buck of, self-confidence. And he's a sore spot for me because he was supposed to be Hotshot. This was originally supposed to be Hotshot in this cast. In fact, there's even a prototype toy made of Hotshot from this show that was going to be like in the first toys released from it. But at the last second, because of the movie that I love so friggin' much, they decided to make it Bumblebee. So what you guys maybe don't know, but Hotshot is like my all-time favorite character in all of Transformers. There's a whole big backstory. You can listen to a bunch of other podcasts to find out about it. But when I found this out later on that he was replaced by Bumblebee, it was kind of like, oh, what could have been? There's always been sort of this like, Bumblebee. Why do we need this shelf-warming bastard here when we could have got Hotshot?
Well, see, and it's interesting to pick at that a little further too, because Hotshot, in a sense, is a substitute for Bumblebee for the time when Hasbro didn't have the rights to the name.
Right.
So in a weird kind of way, Hotshot is Bumblebee and Bumblebee is Hotshot in a lot of kind of ways. And you throw some Hot Rod in there too, because like I think both of those characters kind of occupy that same kind of role. So this incarnation of Bumblebee, it is interesting to me. And we recently did over on my channel on Mike Seibert Radio, we did a deep dive discussion about Transformers Earthspark, and having seen where Danny Pudi's performance of that elder veteran Bumblebee almost feels like that Bumblebee is this guy. Like when he's like super young and super brash, but then after he's grown and matured, he becomes the Earthspark version. I know that it's different continuities, and that's not exactly, I just mean spiritually.
Oh yeah.
Because like it just kind of feels like that. The TFA Bumblebee feels like the young version of Earthspark Bumblebee. So it's so funny though that you say that, because like when I first saw Armada, I never really made that connection, even though, I mean, other than Hotshot was yellow, I was never like, oh, this is a stand-in for Bumblebee. Like for me, it was like this totally different character, and this is like my dumb moment of like, oh yeah, they obviously, one informed the other. But yeah, it's a weird kind of chicken and egg situation now, where I was like pissed that Bumblebee stood in for Hotshot when Hotshot, probably someone was feeling that about Hotshot standing in for Bumblebee back in the Armada days. Well, and again, the movie really propelled Bumblebee in a way that I don't know if any of us were ready for. It's like, it's like in terms of like the hierarchy, it's like Optimus Prime, Bumblebee ? And then even as we would get into like, Cyberverse and stuff like that, it'd be like Bumblebee first. I mean, it's like that over the last 15 years, I guess, there's been a really big push for Bumblebee, to the point where I think some folks in the fandom almost have Bumblebee fatigue, where it's like Bumblebee again.
Yeah.
And
I'm one of them.
And this is kind of like sort of the beginning of that, I guess, because again, you get the movie, and then you get this. So it's this
exactly. Really, I mean, to that point, like, can you imagine back in 2007? Like, it's crazy now, right? Bumblebee's at the forefront of everything. Bumblebee has become the mascot of Transformers. But back in 2007, before this show came on, someone was like, hold up, should we maybe switch this to Bumblebee? Like, Bumblebee was so kind of off the charts at that point. They were like, they had to have a conversation about the last second. Should we make this Bumblebee? That's really funny to me.
Well, and even then, going further back to G1, I mean, it's, Bumblebee was always like a fun character, but I mean, certainly not on anyone's Mount Rushmore. But
sure. Well, so I wanted to ask of the Autobots that we've been introduced to, and now in just the first 10 minutes, and kind of for the majority of the show, Optimus, Ratchet, Prowl, Bulkhead, Bumblebee. What is your kind of squint test, I guess, or for who these archetypes are? What do you expect out of them? And do you have a favorite?
Yeah, all terrific questions. So I do have thoughts about this group of Autobots. I do think it's an interesting, well-rounded team, and it feels like when the showrunners, the writers, were coming up with this, it felt to me like they were building a superhero team. It's like, you need like a scout, you need a brute, you need a mysterious hothead, it's like, on and on and on, it's like, you start ticking certain archetypal boxes, and it feels like this well-rounded cast fits those roles very well. I like this version of Optimus. I like that he's youthful, maybe a little naive, but also capable. And we see that right away, like right off. Again, this show doesn't waste anything. It's like he's shown that he is he's young, but he's capable, like in terms of like, you know, his combat skills, his proficiency with the melee weapon, with his battle axe, to the point where it even gets Ratchet's attention. He's like, wait a second, what's your deal? And even Bumblebee throws out like this little line of world building. It's like, man, you should be in the Elite Guard. And I'm like, Elite Guard, what the hell is that?
Yes.
You know, and it's just like that little bit of world building is so cool. But Optimus Prime is a really tough character to get absolutely right, because there have been so many iterations, so many different versions. And I mean, not to be a G1er about it, but I still like the G1 presentation of Peter Cullen's Optimus Prime, where basically like he is a strong leader, but he's also kind of a goofy dad. You know, he plays basketball and he makes mistakes, and, you know, he makes errors in judgment. And so he's not infallible. So I think that,
but without being that sort of, as you've kind of maybe said before, like that Optimus that makes mistakes, but is just so fucking sorrowful about it for so long. Like you've mentioned before that you know, you don't really care for that take of Optimus of like, I made one mistake and I'm fucking forever just about it.
I don't like maudlin Optimus Prime. I don't like self-loathing Optimus Prime. And conversely, I don't like Optimus Prime that's a young dummy. You know, it's like the War for Cybertron version, he's a dummy. And I mean, I don't mind him going through trials and learning things, but I don't want him to be a dum-dum. And TFA Optimus is not a dum-dum. He's young, and I love that take. You know, usually I don't, because like I've always thought where like at a in a franchise that has Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime, those are the characters that you can do that type of storytelling with, like the reluctant leader, the brash young hotshot, pardon the phrase, that learns maturity. And it's like that's all Hot Rod Rodimus stuff. Keep that out of my Optimus Prime. But like I think a lot of it is David Kaye's performance as voice actor, but I'm glad I like this Optimus.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I know we don't want to get into maybe voice actors in this high level, but I only relatively recently found out that David Kaye was the voice of this Optimus. And back in 2007, if my buddies that I was watching it with were any kind of Transformers fans, if one of them would have leaned over and said, hey, I think the voice of this Optimus is Megatron from Beast Wars and Beast Machines and Armada, I'd have been like, you're effing nuts, dude. Like, there's no way those voices are the same. And it is. It's this. They took a diabolical, iconic voice actor and then made him the hero of this series. I think that's incredible, and it speaks a lot to his chops as a voice actor.
I don't know what he's doing to young it up, but it's like he sounds youthful, and it's and it is the polar opposite of like the grim gravitas that is Beast Wars Megatron, and it's so interesting.
And I just kind of wonder the foresight that someone had to have to be like, this is our most iconic villain voice, let's see what he can do with the hero. Like, incredible.
And he's still now the only actor who has played both roles, that has been both Optimus Prime and Megatron, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, so okay, back to my question.
Yep.
You know, do you have a favorite? Anything standing out from this crew so far?
My favorite is Ratchet. I am a sucker for a grizzled old grump. Like, I've been watching Transformers the movie for the last 36 years, and even as a kid, I kind of gravitated to Cup. Because he's very grandfatherly, but also grouchy. He's got like these cool stories that may or may not actually be cool. And I see a lot of that in Ratchet, but being kind of like a grouchy older person myself, I kind of gravitate to those characters. But I understand now in a way that I haven't, because like younger fans have really latched onto Ratchet in a way that I've never really understood. It's like I go to TF cons and I see no shortage of Ratchet cosplayers, and I'm just like, what is it about Ratchet that resonates with people? And I think starting with this characterization in TFA, and even some of it from the 2007 movie as well, I think there's a little bit of spillover, but like this is kind of evergreen Ratchet. This is what I hoped, or like Mandela affected what G1 Ratchet is like. G1 Ratchet doesn't really have a whole lot of personality. It's like his voice acting is vaguely grumpy, but it's really just kind of like he's just like the doctor guy. Yeah, I like a Ratchet that's Bones McCoy from Star Trek.
Yes,
that's and this version of Ratchet, to the point where it's like, are you gonna come on this adventure, Ratchet? Yeah, no, somebody needs to stay here and do analysis, and he does it like,
someone's got to analyze this thing. Besides, who needs a bot with one servo in the scrap heap?
Not gonna let that one go, are you?
No.
Very, very dismissively, and he's very grouchy. Even like when they scan their new forms, it's like, oh, hey, this is so great. Ooh, it's roomy. Oh, this is fast. And Ratchet's like, this'll do. I got a soft spot for a grump, and I think my younger friends in the fandom do as well. So if I had to pick a favorite now, I would go with Ratchet. On the flip side of it, if we're going least favorites, now we saw a lot of character growth within Transform and Roll Out.
Now, here's a very Ratchet take on it, right? What's my least favorite thing? What don't I enjoy?
What a note that I wrote in my 7-page notebook here, all caps: Prowl is a dick. and I saw a couple of folks picked up on that on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that in your screenshot.
Yeah. Prowl is a dick. I mean, he's aloof. He's not a team player, and I jumping ahead to the end of the episode, I think he learned some lessons, and especially potent one towards the end there. It's like he gets it, but I think that even going forward, I think there's still going to be some of that elusiveness. I feel very conflicted, because like I think being a G.I. Joe fan, I understand the value of having a elusive, mysterious ninja on your team. I'm a huge Snake Eyes fan. He is one of my very favorite characters, and this version of Prowl feels like he's trying to be discount Snake Eyes. Now, the thing about Snake Eyes, though, is he is loyal to his friends to a fault. Yeah. Whereas Prowl, he's a hot-headed ninja that, he's got the skills. Yeah. It's like you just got to know the weak point, but he's got some lessons to learn, and I'm hoping, in terms of like hopes and dreams, that he continues to learn and continues to grow. But taking like, I don't know, like I like that he's a motorcycle, so I like motorcycle says ninja to me, I guess, because just in terms of like agility, speed, stealth, things like that. I mean, that kind of plays. I like his character model that, kind of like he's a highway patrol style motorcycle cop. That's kind of neat. But I don't know, man. This is one that you were asking about archetypes.
Mhm.
Optimus Prime feels like Optimus Prime. Ratchet feels like Ratchet. Bumblebee feels like Bumblebee. Bulkhead, brand new character, so can't say that. Prowl is the one that doesn't quite fit for me, which I think, though, fans of the IDW comics would be like, what are you talking about? Prowl is a dick, is a straight up trope. It's like, yeah, but that wasn't always that way. Like I grew up with Prowl being, kind of a stoic, like a stoic military tactician, but not necessarily aloof. Whereas TFA Prowl is aloof. He doesn't want to be with these people. He only has there's only one bot that he can rely on, me.
We're a team, remember? And we need to know we can depend on each other.
Only one bot I depend on. Me.
And so that doesn't scream Prowl to me. So in terms of like things that don't pass the squint test, it's Prowl for me.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say that. Prowl is such a fascinating character. And without getting too far ahead and giving too much away, he is one of the main reasons he's interesting is because in a show that is, like we've said, is for kids, and you need to establish these archetypes and character, builds right away. Something happens even at the end of this mini movie, this little arc that we're in, that changes him for the rest of the series. It was a really bold move to say, let's, here's these established archetypes. We're changing one of them. I think that's something that's really cool. But it always lingers, that sort of arrogance and aloofness that you're talking about, that isn't completely course corrected in him. That's not something that goes away and now he's this new transformed individual. That's something a demon he has to deal with throughout the series. That's just sort of lingering there. I think that's just way beyond what you need to do with a character at this, at a Transformers reboot airing on Cartoon Network.
Exactly.
But they went for it.
And there's a depth and richness. I like that he's a dick. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, even though it doesn't necessarily pass my squint test, I'm coming to this looking for something different. So when I'm looking for something different, I'm definitely getting what I'm looking for there. So let's flip the faction symbol to the other side and run through some of these bad guys.
Yeah. So we do see them in a kind of a shadowy interior Decepticon ship scene, which I love. And I've kind of been back and forth about this because I forgot that this scene even happened. So as I was watching, as I go back and rewatch the show, it was like fun seeing these villains pop up. I totally forgot that they show you all the Decepticons you're going to see throughout season 1 in this moment. But yeah, I mean, a couple notable ones that they do mention, and this, again, we're going backwards, but this is all in the first 10 minutes still.
Yeah.
They mention Blitzwing by name, and they mention Black Arachnia by name. And I think this is very cool and very smart because it gives you a couple character, like little breadcrumbs to follow, little tidbits, a little tantalize, there. But you get Blitzwing. It's a G1 name that we know and love. Boom, there it is. And then Black Arachnia, it shows that something from Beast Wars is not off the table. Something from borrowing from other lore and factions is not off the table. And I think that's a theme that we see throughout this show that we're going to take from everything about Transformers, not just G1.
And that's the thing that my friends keep telling me over and over. It's like, you have to watch this. This is for you. So I do want to talk about this this roll call scene pretty extensively because I think the reason why you get a scene like this is because you don't get to see any of these other people. I mean, aside from Starscream, but you don't see the trio of Blitzwing, Black Arachnia, and Lugnut ever again. Like, for me, this is my only time interacting with these characters, and I love the setting. I love the shadows and all that, but it does feel very roll call to me. Like, okay, well, let's meet all of these characters in a very short economical time, to where it's like everybody gets a moment, but it also kind of feels like, not that it's manufactured, that's not the right term I'm looking for, and forced isn't the term I'm looking for either, but it really feels like we're trying to do a lot of groundwork very quickly, and it does it very effectively. It's a great scene.
I seriously doubt we'll find this all-spark aboard such an insignificant vessel.
Traitor! Megatron is wise! Megatron is bold! Megatron will return the Decepticons to Cybertron!
And wipe our homeland clean of the stench of Autobot tyranny, blah 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 blah. Did you memorize that speech, Lugnut? Or is it just hardwired into that thick one-track processor of yours?
As usual, Black Arachnia, your demeanor is as unpleasant as that accursed organic mode of yours.
Blow it at your actuator, Three-Face.
The name is Blitzwing, insect. Remember it, cause it's the last thing you're gonna hear before I express my feelings in song. The itsy bitsy spider crawler.
You want to battle it out here and now, Blitzwing?
Keep it down!
No one mocks the word of Megatron!
You know, you get Lugnut being like, well, hey, you know, why, Megatron is strong, Megatron is the best. And so you learn a little bit about Lugnut, that, he's almost kind of like the G1 cartoon Shockwave type of thing. Like the vibe I get from Lugnut is that he is fiercely loyal to Megatron, to the point where he has these things. I don't know the extent of Lugnut's vocabulary. It feels like it's very limited, to the point where Black Arachnia says, like, okay, not this speech again. You've practiced it, blah, 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 which of course you learn, about Black Arachnia, that she's sassy, that she doesn't take a lot of shit. She's impatient.
And that they've all been hanging out with each other maybe a little too long in this shuttle.
These people are sick of each other.
Yeah.
So even like when Blitzwing shows up, and I mean, how is it that Blitzwing is a concept that goes back to G1, but we're just now getting a German sounding voice actor in there? I love Blitzwing's voice. It's perfect. And I love that this is so fucking cool. I get the feeling that Blitzwing is really going to resonate with me, because I love the idea of a triple changer having multiple personalities.
Oh, so smart.
I mean, that is
so smart.
How come nobody thought of that before? It's like, and I feel like each personality goes with each alt mode, and even like the gimmick of like the flipping faces, and like the voice changes a little bit each time. I love it. I get the feeling I'm really going to like Blitzwing, because like, even like in this just little bit, I like the design aesthetic. I like that it evokes the G1 design. I mean, clearly you see both tank and plane bits hanging off of him, so
yeah,
he
such
retains,
a cool design.
Yeah, I mean it's great. But yeah, you just get like that little bit of like, you think that like when he flips to like the angry devil face, that he's gonna be like super mean spirited, but then he busts out into song and stuff. It's like, oh no, that's his Joker face.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's just the want to see the world burn face.
Yeah,
which is scary in a different way.
I love it. I love it. It's unhinged. And yeah, this I mean, we spend a lot of time with this version of Starscream in this pilot here, and right away leaves an impression. I mean, one in the vocal delivery, but then just like his design aesthetic, his machinations. it all just in terms of like passing the squint test, this is Starscream through and through. And even for me spending this little amount of time with him, already rocketing up the charts for favorite Starscream. I mean, he's capable. He's, not only is he cunning, but he's capable and he succeeds. And yes. I you don't see that in a G1 Starscream. He fucks off to to abandon islands to make Combaticons that comes to nothing. He teams up with Dr. Arkaville to he's always trying to scheme, but nothing ever works for him. And really for G1 Starscream, his one moment of success gets cut short in a bit of bad comedy. So
and here we see in the first 10 minutes, I know I keep saying that, but it's crazy how much happens in the first 10 minutes. We see his scheme working. His biggest scheme. He does dig that knife in. He is the Judas to Megatron.
And even jumping to the end of the episode where Starscream catches up with the Autobots on Earth and plots successfully to get the Allspark, he has so much contempt for the Autobots. He's like, you think you defeated Megatron?
Yeah.
It was me.
Yeah.
It was me, you dummies. What an exciting moment. And again, what a complete Starscream performance. I mean, I'm sure we will talk at greater length about it, but it's right away, just from the voice. And again, it's not an impression. It's something new, but it's still the same. It's chef kiss, French kiss.
So good. I'm glad you brought this up because this is the only other kind of voice actor I wanted to talk about early on, because it kind of blew my mind this morning in researching that this is. I mean, when I first heard the Starscream, it evoked the original Starscream vibes for me. It was very Chris Latta-esque, and then to come to find out it's the guy that voiced SpongeBob, That's unbelievable. Tom, if we're talking great voice actors, Tom Kenny, wow. Did not know that, you could channel that level of it's both a throwback to the original Starscream voice and it's this kind of new and creepy and terrifying villain, all from that, this beloved voice actor we've known from such sillier characters. It's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and genuine menace. This Starscream is a credible threat by himself. Because think about it, he takes on this entire team of Autobots, which we know is basically a superhero team. He takes them all on his own and defeats them.
Yeah.
By himself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't know if I've seen a Starscream this powerful and this capable without being
successful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, while we're on this and while we're talking about how kind of seeing the silhouettes of the Decepticons, we should really take a moment to talk about Derek J. Wyatt's designs in this series. The artwork for these characters, the character builds themselves, very unique. And now we've kind of come to know it as classic Derek J. Wyatt. Rest in peace, one of my all-time favorite artists. But it is a very interesting take. And you kind of alluded to maybe this is something that maybe turned you off about the series originally. And I think I was in that zone of spit in the face of G1. Let's see something totally different. And I actually took to this series more because it was so different than the original. But I think we have some really interesting character designs. We have little guys, big guys. That's the other thing I wanted to get into too, is that this Megatron is huge. There's a scale system here where you have huge characters and tall characters, small characters, and then you have maybe the biggest Megatron looming over everyone.
Yeah.
this is, I'd love to see a scale chart of like Megatrons through the ages, but I feel like this one, this version of Megatron is maybe like the biggest of all.
Yeah, between him and 2007 live action movie, it's like that.
Yeah,
because that iteration is also shown to be significantly larger than the other Transformers.
Yeah, well, and bigger than Optimus, which is kind of, I mean, I know that's something that came out of the movie too, but like that's always kind of been a fascinating take on Megatron, that he's, you usually need to have this, the hero and the villain need to just have that, classic iconic, they punch in there, like they're like the same silhouette outline almost. But this, they totally went with something different. They went with a kind of like creepy, spooky Megatron design. But I guess along with that, are you now, as we watch this, are you sort of seeing the genius for me of the designs? Is it still kind of jarring for you? Where are you at?
A short answer is yes. I mean, I like it. I do like it. I can still be that 22-year-old kid that didn't like it then and decided it wasn't for me, but I can appreciate it now. It is a little jarring at first, because it is so stylized, but I think it's one of those things, because like I sat down and watched Transform and Roll Out all in one sitting. I think, as with anything else, whether it's watching movies in 3D or in high frame rate or some other type of like viewing experience, there's a certain itchiness that comes with it at first, but once you acclimate and get used to it, you stop seeing it. So, and I think that's true of any of vintage media. Like there are folks that are going back and watching Beast Wars, and those graphics are rough. And, so it's hard to sit through, but I think it's one of those things that, like, once you get used to it and get engrossed by the story, you don't see it anymore. And that was my experience. It's like, I found myself not really noticing the difference in stylization as much the longer I watched it. Now, there would be other times that it would smack me in the face. Like, you get that establishing shot of Detroit, how it looks, so there are like establishing shots that, I really dig and enjoy the design, but the overall aesthetic I like. I will still say, and you'll have to check back with me when we get to the end of this project, how much it resonates with me, because still for me, and I am reluctant and maybe a little sad to say, it's still not my cup of tea. It is still a style that's maybe still a little too exaggerated for my taste. I see why people like it, and I'm fully engrossed in the story. Because I mean, I'm really picking up on what's being put down here, but from like a animation aesthetic, I'm not necessarily going to start commissioning artists to do my favorite characters in a Derek J. Wyatt style. Like I have friends that have like pieces of Derek's art and things like that. For me, it's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, one thing I can say similar to that, when I first saw this show, I was like, oh, these designs are really fucking cool. Mm-hmm. They're never going to have toys for these. This is maybe a toy line that came out and someone took an artistic depiction of them. These aren't going to be toys. But they were. I guess if I can take a second to talk about that, the toy line from this show is phenomenal. The vehicles look like the vehicle modes, and the robots look like the cartoon versions of these robots, and it's a feat of engineering. I mean, we talk about Transformers toys as a feat of engineering just in general. Mm-hmm. These are a feat of engineering of a feat of engineering. The fact that they were able to look like the cartoon car and like the cartoon robot, very stylized in both forms, and actually functionally transform between the two modes. Mm-hmm. I never thought we'd see that when I first saw this show.
And that is where we're going to leave things for today. That is going to wrap it up for our inaugural episode of Two Mikes, Too Furious. We knew the discussion about the beginning of Transformers Animated was going to be a lengthy discussion, to say the least, but we also didn't want to scare away any potential new listeners by posting like a 4-hour mega episode. But this felt like as good a stopping point for a great cliffhanger ending. Now, our next episode is going to be out in 2 weeks, and now that we've talked about the characters and the overall setup for the world of Transformers Animated, we can really get into the meat of the discussion proper about the pilot movie Transform and Roll Out! ! That episode will run about as long as this one, maybe a titch longer, but we're really looking to keep these episodes under 2 hours, at least to start. Thank you for hanging out with us, and if you would like to check out my other podcast, Mike Seibert Radio, you can find it everywhere you're listening to Two Mikes, Too Furious. You can also find me on social media at Mike Seibert Radio. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and the spelling on my last name is Seibert. Mikel Andrews has written a few books that are available now on Amazon. The Coming of Mage saga. It's a duology consisting of Coming of Mage and its sequel, A War for the Mages, as well as his latest book, Gone for a Spell. You can connect with him out on socials. He's at Mikel Andrews on Twitter, spelled Mikel. So it's not just me that you have to learn special spelling for. We're equal opportunity spellers. Now, if you would like to connect with the show directly, there are a few ways you can do so. We are at Two Mikes, the number 2, Too Furious, also the number 2, on social media. The show is on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Two Mikes, Too Furious. Want to be a guest on the show? You can send us an email, twomikes2furious@gmail.com. If there's a particular episode of Transformers Animated that you want to join us to talk about, don't wait for us to ask. Call your shots early. And if you would like to hear your voice on the air, send us a voicemail, 231-224-MIKE. That phone number, again, is 231-224-6453. One more time, that's 231-224-6453. We will play your voicemails on the air, and we'd really like to hear from you. So please drop us a line with your questions, comments, criticisms, whatever you would like to say to us. The Mikes community goes beyond just me and Mikel Andrews. We want to make this as inclusive a place as possible, so we would love to hear from you. And we'll talk about that more in our next episode, but that's going to close it out for now. For my co-host, Mikel Andrews, my name is Mike Seibert. We are Two Mikes, Too Furious. And until next time, make good choices.